They called her dead weight. The insult was never spoken to her face, of course. It was a murmur in the mess hall, a shared glance in the corridors of Forward Operating Base Nightingale, a quiet consensus among soldiers who measured a person's worth in muscle mass and trigger pull speed. Master Warrant Officer Anya Petrova had neither. She was a relic, a woman whose age was etched in the fine lines around her steel-gray eyes and the deliberate, almost painful slowness of her movements. Her transfer orders were a mystery, her presence a bureaucratic error. She was assigned to the quartermaster stores, a glorified stock clerk tasked with counting ration packs and thermal blankets. It was a place for the broken, the useless, the ones waiting for a quiet discharge. The soldiers, young and sharp and honed for the vicious, high-altitude warfare of this desolate moon, saw her as exactly that, dead weight on a ship already taking on water. The crisis, when it came, arrived not with the shriek of incoming artillery but with the insidious whisper of static. A patrol, Bravo 7, was caught in a sudden ion storm, a meteorological demon unique to this rock. Comms went from garbled to gone. On the holographic map in the Tactical Operations Center, their 4 life sign indicators flickered, then vanished. Panic, cold and sharp, began to bloom. The base commander, Colonel Marcus Thorne, a man whose authority was as rigid as his posture, saw only one reality. 4 of his soldiers were about to be swallowed by the storm, and he was blind, deaf, and helpless. It was in that moment of escalating failure, with his expert technicians failing and his command structure crumbling, that the old woman from the supply depot walked calmly into the heart of the chaos. She was about to become the fulcrum upon which Njihev's entire operation would turn. Anya Petrova arrived on a Tuesday, on a heavy-lift transport that bucked and groaned through the turbulent upper atmosphere. She stepped onto the landing pad and the wind, a razor-edged thing full of ice and grit, immediately tried to push her back. She held her ground, a small, unmoving figure in a standard-issue parka, her face impassive. A young specialist, name-tag reading Jensen, was sent to collect her. He tried to take her duffel bag. "I can get that for you, ma'am." "I can manage," she said. Her voice was low and gravelly, as if she hadn't used it in some time. Jensen, eager and polite, walked her to her assigned billet. "The Q store is this way. Sergeant Reyes will get you situated. It's mostly just inventory management. We're switching to a new digital manifest system, so it's all a bit of a mess." He was trying to be helpful, to soften the blow of her assignment. Everyone knew what the Q store meant. Anya simply nodded. The base was a collection of prefabricated modules hunkered down in a rocky caldera, shielded from the worst of the winds but exposed to the sky. She took it all in, her gaze lingering for a second too long on the placement of the perimeter defense turrets, the overlapping fields of fire from the guard towers, the location of the primary comms dish. Her eyes didn't just see. They assessed. They calculated. Sergeant Reyes was a man whose gut preceded him into every room. He gave Anya a cursory glance, his expression a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Petrova? Right. Your terminal's over there. Start with the medical supplies. We need a full count of every suture kit, plasma pack, and stim shot. Log it all. Don't get in the way." For 3 days, Anya did exactly that. She sat at the dusty terminal, her fingers moving over the keypad with a slow, methodical rhythm. The young soldiers who came in for supplies would glance at her, this ghost at the desk, and then quickly look away. She was an uncomfortable reminder of fragility, of the body's eventual decay, a truth no 20-year-old grunt wanted to contemplate. She organized the shelves not alphabetically, as Reyes had instructed, but by tactical application. Trauma kits next to tourniquets, burn dressings next to biofoam canisters. It was a logic lost on everyone but her. She noted a small but significant discrepancy in the manifest for C-12 plastique explosives. The logs said 10 crates. Her count found 11, tucked away behind a stack of obsolete body armor. She made a quiet note and said nothing. Colonel Thorne made his first formal inspection of the Q store on the 4th day. He was a man who thrived on precision and order, and the chaos of the digital manifest transition was a burr under his saddle. He saw Anya sitting at her terminal, her back straight, her focus absolute. He walked over, his boots loud on the metal floor. "Master Warrant Officer Petrova," he said, his tone clipped. He didn't like her rank. It was an old, archaic designation that hinted at a long, convoluted service record. Yet her file was a barren landscape of redactions and vague administrative notes. It said she was qualified for logistical support. "Colonel," Anya replied, not turning around. "Sergeant Reyes tells me you're making progress," Thorne said. Though it wasn't a compliment. It was an accusation in waiting. "Your transfer here was abrupt. Command just dropped your name on my desk. No preamble." "I follow my orders, sir," she said, her fingers finally stilling on the keypad. Thorne circled the terminal, standing in front of her now so she was forced to look at him. His eyes were cold, analytical. "This is a forward combat zone, Petrova. Every person here has a function directly tied to the operational readiness of this base. We carry no passengers. Do you understand?" The insult was clear. She was a passenger. Dead weight. "I understand my duties, Colonel," Anya said. Her gaze was flat, unreadable. It seemed to discomfit him. He was used to deference or fear, not this placid wall of neutrality. "See that you do," he snapped, his patience fraying. "I run a tight ship. I won't have my efficiency compromised by a legacy transfer who should be processing pension paperwork in some climate-controlled office back on Earth." He turned on his heel and strode out, his irritation radiating behind him like a heat signature. Jensen, who had been nearby pretending to organize a shelf of nutrition paste, winced. He glanced at Anya, expecting to see a flicker of hurt, of anger, of anything. He saw nothing. She simply turned back to her screen, her reflection a pale mask in the dark glass. She blinked once, slowly, and then her fingers resumed their steady, unhurried work. The colonel's dismissal was just another piece of data, another variable to be filed away. It meant nothing. The wind howling outside the thick walls of the module, the subtle sag in the roof supports, the faint hum of the overstressed power conduit running beneath the floor. Those things meant something. They were weaknesses, and Anya Petrova had spent a lifetime studying weaknesses. In the days that followed, Anya maintained her quiet routine. She finished the medical inventory, her final count more accurate than the digital systems. Then she moved on to munitions, then to engineering parts. But when her shift was over, she didn't retreat to her small, sterile billet. She walked. Her pace was slow, measured, giving the impression of an old woman taking a constitutional. But her eyes were sharp, constantly scanning, absorbing. She walked the perimeter fence twice a day, once at dawn, once at dusk. The guards in the towers grew accustomed to the sight of her, a lone figure tracing the edge of their world. They didn't know she was mapping the blind spots in the sensor grid, the areas where the rocky terrain created shadows the thermal imagers couldn't penetrate. She noted the predictable patrol patterns of the perimeter guards, the precise 3-minute interval when the sightlines of Tower 3 and Tower 4 failed to overlap. She saw a vulnerability, a seam that could be exploited. She spent an hour each evening in the common area adjacent to the comm center. The door was always propped open for ventilation. She would sit with a cup of lukewarm tea, seemingly lost in thought, but she was listening. She listened to the chatter of the technicians, to the specific jargon they used to describe atmospheric signal degradation. She learned the name of their primary satellite, the frequency bands they favored, and their backup protocols. She saw their over-reliance on a single high-orbit relay, a powerful but singular point of failure. Jensen, the comms specialist who had greeted her, would sometimes nod to her as he passed. "Evening, ma'am." "Specialist," she would reply, her voice a low rumble. He once saw her staring intently at a diagnostic schematic on a secondary monitor. "Something interesting, ma'am?" "The cascade filters," she said, her voice distant. "The power routing seems inefficient. It could create a feedback loop in the event of a significant power surge." Jensen frowned, looking at the diagram. "It's standard issue military hardware, ma'am. Top of the line. Standard issue is not always optimal," she murmured, and turned back to her tea. The comment was filed away by Jensen as the strange rambling of an old-timer. Her observation was not limited to hardware. She studied the people. She saw the easy confidence of Bravo Team's leader, Sergeant Cade, and the nervous energy of the squad's rookie, a kid named Miller. She watched Colonel Thorne in the mess hall, how he always sat with his back to a wall, how his gaze constantly swept the room even as he ate. He was a man burdened by immense pressure, a pressure that made him brittle. She recognized the signs. She had seen men like him break before. She saw the weariness in the medics, the gallows humor of the mechanics. She learned the entire ecosystem of FOB Nightingale, its strengths, its weaknesses, its rhythms. She was building a map in her mind, not of the base, but of the base as a living, breathing organism. And she was identifying all of its potential points of failure. No one noticed. To them, she was just the old woman who counted boxes and drank tea, a ghost haunting the edges of their real, important lives. They had no idea she was the only one seeing the whole picture. The pressure began as a change in the light. The perpetual gray of the sky deepened to a bruised purple, and the ceaseless wind took on a new, keening pitch. A fine, gritty dust, the consistency of flour, began to snake its way through every microscopic crack in the base's modules. The ion storm had arrived ahead of schedule and with unforeseen violence. On the main screen in the Tactical Operations Center, the weather display turned from angry red to a solid, terrifying black. All exterior patrols, return to base, effective immediately. Colonel Thorne's voice boomed over the comms, laced with an urgency that silenced the usual background chatter. "Sir, we have a problem." A voice crackled back, distorted by static. It was Sergeant Cade, leader of Bravo 7. "We're in the Gorgon's Teeth Canyon system. The wind shear is... we can't get our vehicle out. The walls are unstable." "What is your position, Bravo 7? Thorne demanded. "Approximately clicks north of repeat, signal breaking." The voice dissolved into a roar of white noise. A second later, the comms link died completely. "Get them back!" Thorne yelled at Jensen, who was manning the primary comms station. "Switch to the backup relay. Now!" "Trying, sir." Jensen's fingers flew across his console. "The atmospheric ionization is off the charts. The primary relay is offline. Switching to secondary." "No, sir, it's not punching through. The signal is completely degraded." The 4 green diamonds representing Bravo 7 on the holographic map flickered erratically. "Life signs are fluctuating, Colonel," another technician called out. "The storm is interfering with the biometric sensors." Thorne slammed his hand on the central table. "Triangulate their last known position. I want every long-range sensor focused on that quadrant." "Sensors are getting nothing but ghost images and storm feedback, sir. It's a total whiteout." The TOC, usually a place of controlled, professional calm, was descending into a vortex of managed panic. Voices overlapped. Alarms beeped with insistent, meaningless warnings. The digital screens filled with error messages and cascading lines of failed code. Thorne stood in the center of it all, his face a mask of grim frustration. He had lost his eyes and his ears. His 4 soldiers, his responsibility, were gone. Swallowed by a storm he couldn't see and a silence he couldn't break. The green diamonds on the map blinked one last time, turned red, and then vanished. A collective gasp went through the room. For red icons now read, "Signal lost." They were, for all intents and purposes, dead. The pressure in the room became unbearable, a physical weight that seemed to suck the very air from their lungs. Into this maelstrom of failure and fear, Anya Petrova walked. She moved with the same unhurried pace she always used, a stark contrast to the frantic energy buzzing around her. She had been in the adjacent corridor, drawn by the rising pitch of the alarms and the panicked voices. The guards at the door, distracted and overwhelmed, didn't even see her slip past them. She stopped just inside the entrance, her gray eyes taking in the entire scene in a single sweeping glance. She saw the failing consoles, the desperate faces, the rigid, helpless posture of the colonel. She moved toward the main comm station where Jensen was now frantically trying to reboot the entire system. A last-ditch effort that was accomplishing nothing. "It's no good, sir," he said, his voice cracking. "The core drivers are corrupted. The ion saturation is too high for a digital handshake." Anya came to a halt beside him. She didn't speak to Thorne. She didn't announce her presence. She spoke directly to Jensen, her voice low but clear, cutting through the background noise. "Stop the reboot." Jensen glanced up, his eyes wide with stress. He saw the old woman from the Q store and his first instinct was annoyance. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I don't have time for—" "Stop the reboot," she repeated, her tone unchanged. But there was an authority in it now, a core of absolute certainty that made him pause. She pointed a steady finger at a small, covered port on the side of the console, a port dusty from disuse. "That's a Series 4 analog diagnostic port. Your hardware is modern, but the chassis is based on an older architecture. Open it." Confused, but compelled by her confidence, Jensen pried the cover open. "Do you have a multiband signal converter and a standard copper core line splicer?" Anya asked. "A what?" "Ma'am, that's 20-year-old tech. We might have something like that in deep storage." "Quartermaster stores," Anya said. "Engineering section, crate 7B. It's labeled, obsolete comms hardware go." Thorne had finally noticed her. He strode over, his face thunderous. "Petrova, what in God's name do you think you're doing? Get out of my TOC." Anya met his furious gaze without flinching. "Colonel, your digital systems have failed. The storm's ionization field is too dense for high-frequency encrypted signals. But it will have less effect on a low-frequency, narrowband analog pulse. If we can create a carrier wave, we might be able to get a signal through." Thorne stared at her, dumbfounded. It sounded like nonsense, the desperate babbling of someone out of their depth. But Jensen, his face suddenly illuminated with a flicker of understanding, was already halfway out the door, shouting for someone to get him the key to the storage locker. Anya turned her attention back to the console. Her movements were no longer slow or frail. They were precise, economical. She bypassed the main power distribution and rerouted a low-voltage current directly to the diagnostic port. She began typing commands into a raw command line interface, her fingers moving with a speed that belied her age. She was stripping away layers of sophisticated software, digging down to the machine's most primitive functions. Jensen returned, breathless, clutching a tangle of dusty cables and a heavy, archaic-looking metal box. "Got it, ma'am. Splice the primary output into the main antenna array feed. Bypass the digital encryption buffer completely," she commanded, not looking at him. "I need a direct, unshielded connection." "Ma'am, that could fry the entire array," Jensen protested. "The array is currently useless," Anya stated flatly. "Do it." Jensen, now acting on pure instinct and the sheer force of her will, did as he was told. He worked with feverish haste, his hands connecting wires and flipping switches under her calm, verbal guidance. Thorne stood behind them, silent, his arms crossed, watching this bizarre procedure with a mixture of disbelief and a dawning, terrifying sliver of hope. The room fell quiet. The only sound was the hum of the terminal and the howl of the storm outside. Anya finished her sequence of commands. She had programmed the system to emit a simple, repeating pulse on a very specific, very low frequency. It was the digital equivalent of banging two rocks together. "It's done," Jensen said, stepping back. On the screen, a single, flat line represented the output. Nothing. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Thorne's face hardened. It was a failure, a waste of precious time. He opened his mouth to order them to stop, to get this crazy old woman out of his command center. And then it happened. A tiny, almost imperceptible spike appeared on the flat line. Then another, and another. They were rhythmic. Ordered. Dot, 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 pause, dash, 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 pause, dot, dot, dot. Jensen's eyes widened in disbelief. "Is that?" Anya's gaze was fixed on the screen. Her expression remained impassive, but her voice was firm. SOS, they're alive, and they're sending Morse code. She had found them. In the heart of a storm that had defeated 1 billion credits worth of technology. She had found them with a ghost of a signal, a whisper from the past. The atmosphere in the Tactical Operations Center underwent a seismic shift. The frantic, panicked energy evaporated, replaced by a stunned, focused silence. Every eye in the room was fixed on the frail-looking woman standing at the comms console, then at the rhythmic pulse on the screen, the ghost of a signal she had conjured from the electronic storm. Colonel Thorne, who moments before had been ready to physically remove her, stood frozen. The condescension in his posture had vanished, replaced by a rigid, cautious stillness. He took a step forward, his voice low, stripped of its earlier bluster. How? It was a single word, but it contained a universe of questions. How did you know? How did you do that? Who are you? Anya didn't look at him. Her focus was entirely on the screen, her mind deciphering the faint, rhythmic spikes. Old systems are less complex, she said, her voice a low murmur. They have fewer points of failure. High-frequency digital signals are fragile. They require a stable medium. Low-frequency analog pulses are crude, but they are robust. They can punch through interference that would shred a data packet. It's just physics, Colonel. Her explanation was simple, factual, and utterly devoid of pride. It was a statement of fact, not an assertion of brilliance. This, more than anything, seemed to unnerve Thorne. He was a man who understood ego, ambition, and the chain of command. He did not understand this quiet, implacable competence. Jensen looked at Anya with an expression of pure reverence. He was a digital native, a technician who had been trained on the most advanced systems in the fleet. The idea of using an analog splicer and Morse code was as alien to him as using a sextant to navigate space. It was a history lesson brought to life. Ma'am, he began, his voice full of awe. That specific bypass. It's not in any of the modern tech manuals. I've never even seen it diagrammed. It wouldn't be, Anya said simply. She adjusted a dial on the converter box, her touch delicate. The signal on the screen sharpened slightly. It was a field modification developed during the Outer Rim skirmishes. We didn't have reliable satellite uplinks. We had to make do with what we had. The word we hung in the air. Thorne's eyes narrowed. The Outer Rim skirmishes were decades ago. A brutal, low-tech conflict fought in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. The official records were heavily classified. What was a logistical support officer doing with knowledge from that era? His gaze fell on her file, still open on a secondary monitor. It was a blank wall, a lie. He was beginning to understand that the woman standing before him was not the person described in that file. The dismissal he had felt earlier was curdling into a profound, unsettling curiosity. The dead weight had just become the most vital asset on his entire base. Keep that channel open, specialist, Thorne ordered Jensen, his voice regaining its command tone, but now it was directed with a newfound respect for the process Anya had initiated. He turned his full attention to her. Petrova, can you get more from them? Position. Status. They are repeating their call for help and their identifier, Anya replied. Her ear tilted slightly, as if she could hear the clicks as well as see them. I will modify the output to send a single, clear ping in response. An acknowledgement. If they are able, they will switch to sending a situation report. She typed another sequence of commands. A single, powerful pulse went out from the base, a lonely shout into the roaring void. The room held its breath. For a long, tense minute, the incoming signal was just the same repeating SOS. Then it changed. The rhythm became more complex, faster. Anya listened, her head cocked. She didn't need to write it down. She translated in real time, her voice calm and steady. Position, confirmed in Gorgon's teeth. Grid reference, 47 Gamma 9. Vehicle disabled. Stranded at base of canyon. Taking intermittent fire from ridge above. 1 wounded. Miller. Leg injury. Non-critical. Hostiles. Number unknown. Using the storm for cover. They are pinned down. Every word landed like a hammer blow in the silent room. They weren't just lost. They were trapped. Hunted. The brief flicker of relief was extinguished, replaced by a colder, more immediate dread. The storm that had hidden them was now their prison, and their cage was a shooting gallery. The second test began not with a question, but with a statement of fact from the base's chief tactical officer. "Colonel, we can't mount a rescue. Not in this storm. Air support is impossible. A ground vehicle would never make it through the canyon pass with this wind shear. We'd be exposing a rescue team to the same fate as Bravo 7. And with the enemy holding the high ground, it's a suicide mission." The assessment was brutal but accurate. It was the logical, tactical conclusion. They would have to wait out the storm and hope Bravo 7 could survive. Hope was not a strategy Thorne liked to rely on. He looked at the holographic map, at the flashing red icon where his soldiers were trapped. He felt the walls of protocol and procedure closing in on him. All his training, all his experience offered no solution. He turned, his gaze finding Anya. She was still standing by the comms console, a quiet island in the sea of their collective anxiety. She wasn't looking at the comms feed anymore. Her eyes were on the holographic map, her expression distant, analytical. She was already working the problem. Thorne made a decision. It went against every regulation, every instinct he had as a commander. He was about to hand a measure of control to an unknown quantity, a ghost with a redacted file. He walked over to her, his steps deliberate. The other officers in the TOC watched, sensing another shift in the room's power dynamic. "Petrova," he said. His voice was quiet, for her alone. "The tactical assessment is that a rescue is not viable. We wait." He wasn't giving an order. He was presenting a conclusion, waiting for her to refute it. Anya's gaze lifted from the map to meet his. "If you wait, they will die," she said. It was not a prediction. It was a certainty. The hostiles are using the storm as cover. When it breaks, they will lose that advantage. They will not wait. They will push their attack and eliminate Bravo 7 before air support becomes a factor. Her logic was cold, sharp, and undeniable. She saw the tactical reality more clearly than anyone. "Then what is the alternative?" Thorne pressed, his voice tight. "My tactical officer is correct. A frontal assault through the canyon is suicide." "You are thinking in two dimensions, Colonel," Anya said. She raised a hand and gestured toward the holographic map. "You see the canyon as a corridor, a fatal funnel. But you are not seeing the environment as a whole." She stepped up to the table. With a few deft touches on the control panel, she manipulated the image. The 2D tactical display shifted into a 3D topographical rendering. She zoomed in on the Gorgon's teeth, the jagged peaks and deep ravines rendered in stark relief. Her posture changed. The slight stoop was gone. She stood taller, her presence suddenly filling the space around her. She was no longer a quartermaster's assistant. She was a commander at her battle map. "Your long-range geological surveys are incomplete," she began, her finger tracing a series of faint lines on the holographic rock. "They map the surface, not what's beneath. But this region is volcanically active. That means lava tubes. Cave systems." She highlighted a deep fissure, miles from the main canyon entrance, that the survey had dismissed as a geological fault line. "This is not a fault line. It is an outflow vent for a dormant volcanic system. Based on the erosion patterns I observed on the western ridge during my walks, there is a high probability that this vent connects to a network of tunnels that run beneath the Gorgon's teeth." She pointed to another location. "And here, the canyon wall where Bravo 7 is pinned down. The wind patterns there are unique. The storm is being funneled, creating an acoustic dead zone at the base of the cliff. They can't hear their attackers, but it also means their attackers can't easily hear an approach from below." She outlined her plan. It was audacious, complex, and utterly unconventional. A small, two-man rescue team wouldn't go through the canyon. They would enter the cave system through the outflow vent she had identified. They would travel underground, bypassing the hostiles on the ridge completely. They would emerge through a lower fissure near Bravo 7's position, using the acoustic dead zone to mask their arrival. But the hostiles, Thorne interrupted. They'll see the extraction. They'll fire on them as they retreat. No, Anya said, her voice firm, because you will provide a diversion. At precisely 0400 hours you will fire 3 mortar rounds. Not at the ridge. That would confirm you know their position. You will target this rock formation. Half a click to the east, she indicated a massive, unstable-looking spire of rock. The formation is called the Needle by the locals. It's granite resting on a sandstone base. The impact from the mortars won't destroy it, but it will trigger a localized rockslide. It will be loud, dramatic, and it will draw the enemy's attention eastward. In the confusion, the rescue team will extract Bravo 7 back through the cave system. They will be gone before the dust settles. The TOC was utterly silent. The officers stared at the map, then at Anya. She had formulated a multi-stage, environmentally integrated infiltration and extraction plan in minutes, based on data she had gathered through casual observation. She had seen a battlefield where they had only seen a landscape. Thorne stared at her, his mind reeling. The plan was brilliant. It was also incredibly risky, based on geological assumptions and observations made by a clerk. This is theoretical, he said, his voice strained. It's based on your personal observations. You're asking me to risk a rescue team on a guess. Anya's gray eyes locked onto his. It is a calculated risk, Colonel. Your alternative is the certainty of failure. He had to know. He had to ask. Who are you? Anya ignored the question. She turned to the comms console, her focus already on the next phase. She began tapping out a new message in Morse code, a series of complex instructions for Bravo 7. She was telling them to prepare for extraction from a direction they wouldn't expect. Sergeant Cade, on the other end of that faint signal, received the message. A plan involving caves and a mortar diversion. It was insane. It was also their only hope. He tapped back a simple acknowledgement, followed by a question born of desperation and military protocol. Who is advising command? Identify. Thorne watched Anya, waiting for her answer. The entire room waited. Anya paused, her fingers hovering over the key. She took a quiet breath. Then she tapped out the reply. It was a single word. Kestrel. In the makeshift shelter at the bottom of the canyon, Sergeant Cade stared at the small, flickering light of his comms device as it translated the Morse code. Kestrel. The name echoed in his mind, a name from legends and ghost stories, a call sign whispered in training camps but never spoken aloud. It was the designation for a legendary operative from the special warfare groups, a strategist and infiltrator so effective, so phantom-like, that most soldiers believed the name was just a myth, a boogeyman created to inspire recruits. The stories said Kestrel could see weaknesses in any defense, could turn an enemy's strength into a fatal flaw. They said Kestrel was retired. Or dead. Sir? The young Private Miller asked from where he lay, his leg crudely splinted. What is it? What did they say? Cade looked at his men, his face pale beneath the grime and snow. Change of plans, he said, his voice thick with a strange, new emotion. We're being guided by a ghost, he keyed his transmitter. Acknowledged, Kestrel. Bravo 7 standing by. Back in the TOC, Thorne heard the reply. He didn't understand the significance of the name, but he saw the immediate, absolute obedience in Cade's response. It was the tone of a soldier acknowledging a higher, almost mythical authority. His gaze bored into Anya. Kestrel? It is a name they will understand, was all she said. Her attention was now absolute, her focus a palpable force in the room. She was no longer advising. She was commanding. Select your rescue team. 2 volunteers. They must be proficient in close-quarters combat and spelunking. They have 90 minutes to prepare. The intensity of the next hour and a half was unlike anything FOB Nightingale had ever experienced. Under Anya's precise, calm direction, an impossible plan took shape. 2 seasoned rangers, Sergeants Diaz and Cole, volunteered for the mission. Anya briefed them herself, using the 3D map to walk them through every turn of the theoretical cave system, every potential pitfall. She spoke of air quality, of listening for water drips that could indicate structural instability, of using the natural acoustics of the tunnels to mask their sound. Her knowledge was encyclopedic, terrifying in its depth. As the rescue team prepared to depart, the mission's complexity reached its peak. Anya stood at the center of the TOC, a conductor orchestrating a deadly symphony. She had one hand on the comms link to the rescue team, another guiding the mortar crew, and her mind on Bravo 7, waiting in the dark. "Kestrel to rescue team," she spoke into the mic, her voice stripped of all its earlier frailty. It was a commander's voice, cold and clear. "You are at the vent entrance. Report." "Entrance is clear, Kestrel." Diaz's voice came back, steady despite the howling wind. "It's a tight squeeze, but the geology matches your projection. We're going in." The mission was underway. For the next hour, the TOC was a place of hushed tension. Anya guided the team through the darkness beneath the earth, her instructions based on a mental map she had constructed from faint erosion lines and geological theory. It should have been impossible. The climax arrived as the rescue team reached the final fissure. "Kestrel, we have visual on Bravo 7's position, approximately 50 meters below us. The acoustic dampening is real. We can see the storm, but we can barely hear it. It's eerie." "Stand by," Anya ordered. She turned to the mortar crew officer. "Target the needle. Fire on my mark." Anya's eyes were on the chronometer. Her timing had to be perfect. She was coordinating 3 separate elements, 2 in the field, 1 on the base, in a zero-visibility environment, based on a signal made of clicks. "Bravo 7, she sent in Morse code. "Prepare to move on diversion. Extraction team is in position." She took a breath. "Mortar team, fire." "Fire," the officer yelled. 3,000 meters away, 3 shells arced through the storm. Anya, Diaz, Cole, and Thorne all held their breath. The shells struck the base of the rock spire. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a low, grinding roar echoed faintly through the comms. "The rock slide. Diversion is successful," the tactical officer yelled, pointing at a massive new energy signature on the seismic sensors. "The enemy is reacting. We're picking up movement. All heading east." "Rescue team, go," Anya commanded. "You have 2 minutes. Get them out." In the chaos of the rockslide, as the hostiles on the ridge scrambled to assess the new threat, Diaz and Cole rappelled down the cliff face. It was a swift, violent, and perfectly executed extraction. They secured Miller and the rest of Bravo 7 and retreated back to the fissure. During the height of this tension, as Anya leaned forward to adjust a setting on the console, the zipper on her bulky parka snagged and pulled open. The fabric fell away, revealing the simple, gray uniform shirt she wore beneath. Pinned to the fabric, just over her heart, was a small, unassuming piece of metal. It was not a standard-issue medal. It was matte black, shaped like a 7-pointed star, with no reflective surfaces. It was designed not to be seen. Colonel Thorne's eyes, flicking from the map to her, snagged on it. His breath hitched. His face went ashen. He knew what it was. He had seen it only once before in a top-secret briefing at the War College. It was the Obsidian Star, the highest, most secret award in the entire coalition military, given for acts of strategic, unconventional, and decisive victory in circumstances beyond the scope of declared warfare. It wasn't an award for soldiers. It was an award for ghosts, for the architects of impossible victories, for the legends who were never supposed to have existed at all. The name Kestrel slammed into his mind not as a call sign, but as a title. He was standing next to a living myth, and he had ordered her to count blankets. The hangar bay doors ground open, letting in a swirl of icy wind and the scent of ozone from the dying storm. The noise in the cavernous space died down as the battered figures of Bravo 7, supported by the rescue team, limped onto the deck plating. They were covered in grime, their armor scarred, but they were alive. All of them. Medics rushed forward, but Sergeant Cade held up a hand, stopping them. His eyes scanned the crowd of faces that had gathered to welcome them back. He saw technicians, mechanics, off-duty pilots, and at the back, Colonel Thorne. Then his gaze found her. Anya Petrova was standing off to the side, near a stack of cargo containers, her parka zipped back up. She was trying to fade back into the background, to become the anonymous quartermaster's assistant once more. Cade's exhausted face hardened with resolve. He took a step forward, away from his men. He straightened his back, bringing his heels together with a sharp click that echoed in the sudden silence. He raised his hand to his brow and rendered the sharpest, most unequivocal salute of his entire career. It was a salute of profound, absolute respect, directed not at the colonel, but at the old woman by the containers. One by one, the other 3 members of Bravo 7, even Miller leaning on a medic's shoulder, turned and did the same. Then Diaz and Cole, the rescue team, followed suit. A wave of silent, rigid salutes rippled through the hangar. The message was unmistakable. They knew. They understood who had saved them. The entire base, it seemed, held its breath. All eyes were on Anya. She did not return the salute. She simply stood there, her gray eyes meeting Cade's, and gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. It was acknowledgement. It was acceptance. It was enough. Colonel Thorne walked through the parting crowd. He stopped directly in front of Anya, his face a complex mask of emotions. Awe, shame, and a deep, grudging respect. The entire hangar watched, waiting for his reaction. A public dressing down for the breach of protocol? An order for the saluting soldiers to stand down. He did neither. He looked at the spot on her jacket where he knew the obsidian star was hidden. "Your transfer file," he said, his voice low and raspy, loud enough only for her to hear. It said, "Administrative duties, qualified for logistical support." It was a lie. Anya's expression remained unchanged. "A file is a piece of paper, Colonel. It holds what the person who wrote it wants it to hold. You coordinated a multi-vector deep infiltration rescue in zero visibility conditions, based on geological data you memorized on your evening walks," Thorne stated, as if needing to say it aloud to believe it. "You did it with a 20-year-old analog converter and Morse code. That's not logistical support." He paused, and his posture shifted. The rigid spine of the commander softened into something else, something more human. He stood straighter, not with arrogance, but with the formality of a junior officer addressing a senior one. "Master Warrant Officer Petrova," he said, his voice clear and firm, finally using her full, proper rank with the weight it deserved. "On behalf of every soldier on this base, your service is appreciated." He did not salute. That would be a flagrant violation of the command structure he was sworn to uphold. Instead, he did something more significant. He extended his hand. It was not the handshake of a superior to a subordinate. It was the handshake of an equal, an acknowledgement of a debt that could never be fully repaid. Anya looked at his outstretched hand for a moment before taking it. Her grip was surprisingly firm, her hand calloused and strong. "You have good soldiers, Colonel," she said quietly. "Take care of them." She released his hand, turned without another word, and walked away, her slow, deliberate steps taking her back toward the quiet anonymity of the quartermaster's stores. The term dead weight had been permanently erased from the lexicon of FOB Nightingale. In the week that followed, the culture of the base was fundamentally altered. No one spoke of what had happened in the TOC. There was no official report, no commendation ceremony. The legend of Kestrel was a secret the occupants of that room kept with a sacred silence. But the change was everywhere. When Anya Petrova walked through the corridors, soldiers no longer looked past her. They met her eyes. They would give a slight nod of acknowledgement. They would instinctively step aside to let her pass. In the mess hall, a space was always left for her at the corner table she preferred, the one with its back to the wall. The whispers that had once followed her were gone, replaced by a quiet, watchful respect. She was no longer a ghost. She was a guardian. She returned to her duties in the Q store. To an outsider, it would seem as though nothing had changed. She still sat at her terminal, her fingers moving over the keypad as she cataloged supplies. But now, her work had a different audience. Specialist Jensen came into the store one morning holding a steaming mug. He placed it on the desk beside her. "Brought you some coffee, ma'am." "Thank you, Specialist," she said, not looking up from her screen. I took the liberty of looking up those old field modifications you mentioned," he said, shifting his weight nervously. "The ones from the outer rim. I found some fragments in a decrypted archive. I recalibrated the long-range sensor array's power distribution based on your theory about the cascade filters. Signal clarity is up 30% across all bands." He looked at her, his expression a mixture of pride and student-like hope for approval. "You were right." Anya finally looked at him. A rare, faint glimmer of warmth appeared in her steel-gray eyes. "Good," she said. "Always question the standard issue, Jensen. The manual teaches you the rules. Experience teaches you which rules to break." He nodded, absorbing the lesson. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you, ma'am." He left her to her work, a young soldier with a new understanding of what knowledge and power truly meant. Later that day, after her shift was done, Anya sat on a crate at the back of the cavernous supply depot. The noise of the base was a distant hum. It was her quiet corner of the world. From the pocket of her parka, she took out a small metal object. It was not the obsidian star. It was an old, dented shell casing from a pulse rifle. Nestled inside it, growing in a small bit of nutrient-rich soil she had procured, was a tiny succulent plant. It was a species native to a world she hadn't seen in 40 years, a world of blue suns and quiet seas. The plant was tough, resilient, its fleshy leaves hoarding water to survive in the harshest conditions. With the same precise, deliberate movements she had used to rewire a comms console, she took a small dropper and gave the plant a few drops of purified water. She ran a single, gentle finger over one of its leaves. In the dim light of the Q-store, surrounded by the tools of war, crates of ammunition, rows of rifles, stacks of body armor, this small act of cultivation was an act of defiance. It was a testament to the life she protected, the quiet dignity she had earned, the part of herself that endured beyond the medals and the myths. The Kestrel was a hunter, a ghost, a legend. But Anya Petrova was a gardener, tending to a stubborn piece of life in the middle of a desolate wasteland. The respect she had won was silent and absolute, but here, in the quiet hum of the depot, was the peace she had truly been fighting for.